Hello and good evening. Thank you for joining this brief chat. I'm Dr. Pomilla. It's an honor to be asked to participate in Calvert Internal's first Facebook Live event. I am an infectious disease doctor and an internist. I'll be primarily wearing my infectious disease hat tonight to talk about the flu and the flu shot. Specifically, there are about 7 things I wanted to talk about briefly that you may or may not be aware of regarding the flu and the flu vaccine. But before I get started with that, I just wanted to mention that I'm sure the viewing audience is well educated on the need for a flu shot and is encouraged to get one. I actually got mine earlier today. Which brings me to my first fact. The flu vaccine is actually one of the most cost-effective public health expenditures around. It's not very expensive to make. It reduces your flu risk about 50%. Now, results will vary year to year depending on the match between the vaccine and the circulating flu for that year. Sometimes it's as good as a 60% reduction in flu risk, and sometimes it's 40%, but it averages out to about 50%. According to the CDC, it saves 4,000 to 5,000 American lives yearly. And it basically pays for itself because vaccinated workers are 30% less likely to miss work during flu season than those workers who remain unvaccinated. So, fact number 2. Did you know that more people died from the so-called Spanish flu, also called the 1918 flu pandemic, than directly from World War I itself? Please know that war was the perfect incubator for the flu. There was crowding of troops, there was crowding of war refugees, there was worldwide movement of troops, and regional movement, at least, of refugees spreading the disease. But incredibly, 50 to 100 million people are estimated to have died from that epidemic, which was 5% of the world's population at the time. The U.S. was actually relatively spared compared to other places, but we still lost 500,000 people to the flu. In fact, that 1918 flu pandemic was the second worst epidemic in recorded history after Black Death, which killed more, but was over a 20-year or so period of time. The flu epidemic in 1918 actually has killed more people than have died from the HIV epidemic, which has been ongoing for the last 35 years or so. So if that's how many the Spanish flu killed in 1918, actually going up to about 1920, how many were killed in World War I? Well, according to Wikipedia, about 10 million soldiers and 9 million civilians, including over 100,000 U.S. troops. So World War I was pretty deadly as well, but the Spanish flu was deadlier. Fact number 3. So most major flu pandemics, and let me pause for a moment and just say that a pandemic is basically an epidemic that has spread internationally and throughout the world. So it's just a large epidemic. So most major flu pandemics occur when a flu virus crosses over from an animal host, most commonly swine, chicken, or ducks, over to humans, who therefore lack immunity to it, having not seen the virus before. Because influenza A in particular can exist in many different animal species. So not surprisingly, that was the scenario in 1918 with the Spanish flu. It was a swine flu. There was also a swine flu in 2009, if people remember. However, it wasn't nearly as deadly as the 1918 Spanish flu. I'll use that in parentheses, 500,000 people worldwide died, probably much less than in 1918 due to the availability of a vaccine, although that vaccine was in short supply, at least in the beginning of the flu season. And also probably just better hygiene, better infection control practices, better international communication and preparedness prevented the complete disaster that occurred in 1918. Fact number 4. During the swine flu pandemics of both 1918 and 2009, many otherwise healthy adults died from a fulminant form of the disease. This is in distinction to the usual yearly flu, seasonal flu, where it's usually older adults. But with the swine flu, with those two pandemics, many healthy middle-aged adults died very quickly from the disease. And it's thought that maybe older adults were somewhat protected from prior exposure to swine flu. Presumably, if a vaccine had been readily available earlier in the epidemic, it may have saved some of those otherwise healthy young adult lives. So, fact 5, there are actually a lot of different flu vaccines available. There's a trivalent vaccine, which is sort of the standard, which has protection against 2 types of influenza A and 1 type of influenza B. There's a quadrivalent vaccine, which is protects against 2 types of A and 2 types of influenza B, and that's what Calvert Internal has in stock. There's a high-dose vaccine that is proven to be more effective in those over the age of 65, and Calvert Internal will have those in stock by the end of next week, hopefully. Usually we have it in stock right after Labor Day, but this year there's been a little bit of a delay, but we should have it by next week for our over 65-year-old patients. And it should also be noted that egg allergy is no longer a reason to avoid getting a flu shot. The flu shots now have minimal amount of egg protein, and so the FDA has said that even those with severe egg allergies can safely get the flu shot. Nonetheless, if there are concerns, there is an egg-free shot made through recombinant technology and another one made through cell culture technology that are available, although those specialty vaccines are not available with Calvert Internal Medicine at this point. And it should be noted that all of those mentioned vaccines, the trivalent, the quadrivalent, the high dose, the egg-free one, they're all inactivated vaccines, so you can't get the flu from an inactivated vaccine. There is actually one live attenuated vaccine available called a flu mist, which is a nasal spray. It's used only in those ages 2 to 49. It can't be used in somebody who's got an immunocompromised immune system because it is a live attenuated vaccine and you can get the flu from that. And in fact, if there's a household member who's immunocompromised, you shouldn't get that shot. And it's also proven not quite as effective. So it's good for people who really don't want to get a shot, but it's generally not as good as the flu shot. And Calvert Internal does not carry that in stock. Okay, fact number 6 I think we're up to is that it is best to get the flu shot 2 weeks before you get, at least 2 weeks before you get exposed to the flu, because it takes that amount of time to mount antibodies from the flu vaccine. So since you never know when you're going to be exposed to the flu, the peak season to get vaccinated, really, peak time is really September or October are very good times to get the vaccine. I should note that the last few years in Maryland, the peak flu season was really pretty late. It was in January and February, and there was also actually pretty decent flu activity even throughout March. So late vaccination is better than not getting vaccinated at all, although supplies sometimes diminish and it's sometimes hard to find later in the season. Regarding the timing of getting the flu vaccine, protective antibodies last all season, and actually it will last for several years. Remember I mentioned about elderly people being protected from the swine flu because they may have been exposed to it before and had protective antibodies. The same is actually true with the flu shot. You will have protective antibodies for years, but the problem is the next season it's going to be a different flu that's circulating, and that's why you need a yearly flu shot. Which brings me to my last fact and good news. Researchers are working on a single lifetime flu vaccine that you'd only need to get once. They're looking at a part of the flu virus that does not mutate as much as other parts and seeing if they can derive protective antibodies and a flu shot from that. That's the good news. The not so good news is it's unclear exactly when that's going to be available. It does not appear that that is going to be available in the next couple of years at least. And so until then, it's best to get a yearly flu shot. So we may have time for a question or two before we wrap up. So looking to my assistants here.
So the first question we have for you is, I got the flu shot, but my spouse didn't. Now my spouse is sick, so what do I do?
Right. So the first thing is that hopefully the spouse will get on Tamiflu, and Tamiflu works best if it's given within 48 hours of symptoms, and it will reduce the severity of the flu, and it will reduce the length of time that it takes to get over it. However, the other thing is that even though you may have been vaccinated, if you're the caregiver for somebody sick with the flu, it may be useful for you to talk to your provider about getting Tamiflu prophylaxis. Tamiflu has an FDA indication to prevent somebody from getting the flu shot, from getting the flu if they're exposed to somebody who is sick.
All right. And how do we know the Spanish flu was a swine flu?
So, a little bit of history. In 1997, researchers went to a small town outside of Nome, Alaska, where in 1918, 72 of the 80 residents of that town succumbed to the flu, and it probably happened over the course of a week or two that this town just got decimated. In any event, in 1997, they exhumed a body from the permafrost that was relatively intact. The lungs were relatively intact, and they were able to isolate and extract dead flu virus DNA and determined ultimately that was a swine flu. They're also doing much research on that to see what might have made that flu so deadly.
And Bobby says, what about over 65? Do we need a special shot?
Yes, so there is a high risk, there is a high dose flu shot for those over 65. And really, if you're over 65, that's the shot you should get. Again, Calvert Internal Medicine has it on order. We should have it by the end of next week. It's available elsewhere as well, of course.
Julia asks, are there any reactions to this new vaccine?
To the high dose, I assume. So the high dose, when they first looked at it, there seemed to be some evidence that there may be more localized reactions than the regular flu shot. But when they did a larger study that ultimately led to it being approved by the FDA, there was really no increased incidence of either minor, that is local reactions to it, or more serious reactions to it than to the regular flu shot. But it is approved only for those 65 and older, so it's not covered by insurance, etc., not indicated if you're under 65.
Robin asks, tell us more about Tamiflu. 24 hours doesn't seem like a lot of time. Do we have to go to the office, or can you call it in for us? And how can we get it if we are exposed?
Right, good question. It's actually within 48 hours of sickness. That gives you a little bit more time, and it may be somewhat effective even after that, but generally you want to try to get it within 48 hours. So honestly, the decision to bring somebody in or not is made on a case-by-case basis, at least by me. Oftentimes we don't want people sick with the flu in our waiting rooms and such, even though we have masks available. So oftentimes a provider will just call it in for you. If there's any doubt about whether it's really the flu or something else, because we also don't want to miss a serious bacterial infection that could be mimicking the flu, then you may be asked to be seen. We do have rapid flu tests that can be done right in the office and give us an answer right then and there. You would be asked, anybody who has any symptoms that may be flu related, or asked to mask up when they come to the office during flu season.
Beth asks, when is the best time of year to get the shot?
Right, so it really doesn't become available till late August, and Calvert Internal usually tries to have it the day after Labor Day when we come back from Labor Day holiday. And again, September and October are probably the best time, because some people try to play this game of I'm not going to get it until right before the flu hits, but honestly the antibodies should be protective throughout the entire season and even much beyond the season. So it's best to get it in September or October or November, but you want to get it before you get the flu, otherwise it's too late. Okay, that does it. This has really been a lot of fun for me. I hope you found it enjoyable and educational, and thank you for your attention. See you.